The Bank of Canada is warning Canadians to brace for a tough winter, an economic storm that they created, that has been self-inflicted through their own ridiculous monetary policies that have happened over the past couple of decades. So let's get right into this and pick apart what the Bank of Canada is saying here. The Bank of Canada is warning Canadians to brace for a rough winter. Central banks making things worse in hopes of making them better down the road. Okay, let's see what they're saying here. For years now, central banks around the world have helped consumers and businesses. Now, I've highlighted that word for a reason, is because they haven't helped consumers and businesses in the long run. What they've essentially just done is kick the can down the road and create a bigger bubble that is due to pop later down the road. A lot of people could say, well, Luke, if they didn't do this and that, then we would have had all these companies go bankrupt. And the problem is when people take that thought, they don't realize that that will happen anyway. It's just going to be a lot worse. They're essentially just buying time. And if you have children or kids, it's your kids and children that are going to pay for it. It's also my generation and other generations. I mean, I believe if you are under 40 years old, like your pension will probably be worthless by the time you go to take it, because I think the probability of this bubble continuing for the next 20 years is pretty unlikely, let's be honest, with the way the world order is changing and the structural changes that are happening. And you can see that by how much central banks are buying gold. And it's not central banks like Canada, that's for sure. So what else does it say here? So the world, okay, so in crisis after crisis, they cut interest rates to help people get through. They printed money and bought bonds to prop up markets. I mean, I agree with that. It was just propping up markets. So what happens when you take that prop away? The markets just fall down. And cutting interest rates is part of the problem. It is the reason that we're in this environment that we're in right now. Think about it like this. Imagine you could go to your bank and you could get 8% interest rate on your savings. Are you then going to go out and purchase lots of rental properties on leverage if you're going to be paying like an 8-9% interest rate on the loan? No, you're going to put that money in the bank, you're going to save it, or you're going to use that money to create a business which is going to actually produce something to bring more wealth and prosperity into the economy. And the thing is, we've just created all this malinvestment through cutting interest rates and cutting interest rates. And if you look at this chart, it just shows you where we've been. We've just been going down and down and down and down. And I've done a video on this before and explained how I believe that now we have certainly turned a corner in interest rates where we've gone above the previous high, which hasn't happened. If you look at this chart before, it really hasn't happened to this extreme. So it looks like almost a bottom is in interest rates. That doesn't mean that interest rates aren't going to come down. It just means that they're not going to come down to zero again. It just means that they're not going to stay there for any length of time. I personally just don't think that you're going to see interest rates at zero again anytime soon because of what has happened and the central bank response. And now they're looking at themselves in the mirror and going, we created some of this mess. And of course, they'll never admit that though. And let's just, with everything that's going on with crypto right now, you can really take that, and that is like the poster child almost of what happened in 2021 when they injected all this stimulus into the economy, all this artificial money that was printed and credit that was just thrown into the economy through wage subsidies, direct handouts from the government, and all these different things that created these bubbles. And this is that crypto token that you all probably know about called FTT. And FTX has now gone bust, or they've basically filed for bankruptcy, so they've gone bust. But if you look at this, it accurately describes where we're heading. I mean, you literally had just a Ponzi scheme take off, and literally anybody who invested their money in this got absolutely wiped out essentially by this. And, this is the type of malinvestment that these low interest rate policies drive people to do these insane things. It's part of the reason why the title behind this video. People went insane during 2021 and they thought that housing prices were going to continue forever, and so did all the people in that industry. And I'm not saying I blame them for thinking that either. Could go off on a long tangent on that. I think they need to believe that in order to continue doing what they're doing and selling those houses, because otherwise they would actually have to, they wouldn't be able to do it. There would be a massive conflict of interest inside. So the psychology is massive that the bubble creates, and people want to believe it. They want to believe that they're going to be made rich, and they want to believe that everything is going to be fine. And of course, when everything goes wrong, what do? They go and blame everybody else but themselves, but they were the ones who signed the mortgage. The Bank of Canada didn't sign their mortgage, they signed it. And it's this lack of financial responsibility and lack of accountability that is destroying society today. And I seriously mean that. I had a long chat with my grandfather, who's 87 years old. And we were talking about many different things, but we were talking about history mainly. And I was listening to his thoughts about how things have changed and where the changes really happened in his mind and what made things worse and what made things better. And he said, Luke, one of the worst things that we saw happen was the credit card. When credit became mainstream, that was when everything seemingly started going wrong, and it led to a banking collapse during the late 80s. And we're leading up to another banking collapse, which is going to be of epic proportions. And the problem is, it's going to need a bailout. And that bailout is going to come from me, it's going to come from you, it's going to come in the form of inflation by devaluing the currency, so it will just get worth less and less and less, as has happened decade and decade and decade as we've gone through history. Think about what you could buy. Think about how your purchasing power has been reduced. Think about how inflation is a complete lie. They tell you it's 6%. It's more like 20%. Think about that. Even if you bought a house this year and the price was just flat, you lost 20% of your purchasing power. Most people don't even know. They don't even realize, because of corrupt institutions like the Bank of Canada and the government. They are just I could go off really on a wild tangent, so I'll keep to the story here. The Bank of Canada has raised the interest rate 6 times since March. Rates have shot up from 0.25% to 3.75%, and the bank has warned it's not done yet. We do think we still need to raise rates a little bit further, McClem told CBC News in an interview this week. How far, we will see. And he's taken the same sort of tone as the Federal Reserve to kind of basically just try and control the markets, essentially, to hold the tightness of monetary policy, because they think that that is going to bring down inflation, and it likely will eventually destroy demand in the form of a depression. But we are yet to see the long-term effects of all these hikes, because they take time to unfold in the economy. So I think we're in such a precarious place right now. We're like the calm before the storm, where everybody's walking around. Have you ever seen that movie, The Big Short, where everybody's walking around and that guy who's played by Steve, I forget his second name, the one from The Office. But anyway, that guy's on the phone and he's like, everybody is walking around like there's nothing happening right now. And everything is just falling apart. And that's exactly where I feel like we are today. Like, you could shout it at people and they still don't realize. But us coming together on channels like this, we can help ourselves by preparing and weathering the storm, having insurance against central bank and government stupidity, and just preparing for what we know is eventually going to happen. So anyway, he says the slowdown in economic activity should be short and not very deep, but it will have an impact. The unemployment rate is going to go up. We're not talking about high unemployment rates that we've seen in past recessions, but it's going to go up. I mean, the thing is, it's all just complete garbage what comes out of their mouth, as we know. The fact is, what they say here is just to try and skirt the lines between people trying to be financially responsible, and so that they can also people consume still, so that they keep the economy turning over, because if people don't consume, everything just falls apart. But you literally have people who've been destroyed in this country by the central bank policies over the past 2 years. It's got so extreme now, we need almost deflation of 10%. And all the Bank of Canada is saying is we're going to go back to our 2% inflation target. They're still going to inflate, just at 2%. I mean, does that not sound ridiculous to you? I mean, even when I hear all the politicians across the board, every single politician says, yeah, they have that 2% target for a reason, 2%. They have no idea what they're talking about. Like, we don't need these stupid inflation targets. And right now, what the economy needs is deflation, because people can't even afford food. I mean, literally, in Canada today, many people cannot afford food. Record food bank usage. If you're in a lucky enough position that you can donate to the food bank, please do, because there's just so many families that are going there, and it's been ever increasing over the past 2 years. Even in places like Calgary that people think are cheaper, more affordable to live, the reality is there are just as many people on the edge as there are in places like Toronto and Vancouver. And it is just a disaster, essentially, where we've headed to. And the funny thing is, guys, that they say that this is going to be, the growth is going to be close to zero. So that's essentially a recession anyway. They're essentially admitting a recession is on the way. The reality is their forecasts are always completely wrong, as we know. So anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this video, you might like that one there. You might also like that one there. Thank you so much for watching. Watch out for those crypto scammers in the comments that ask you to go to WhatsApp. I will never do that. And I will see you on the next live stream. Let me know what you think in the comments.